You are Roscoe Denholm, and it is a Saturday afternoon in late September, and you are standing outside Miller's Hardware on Route 9, straddling your Harley, waiting for your riding brothers to finish their coffee, when a small voice interrupts the low rumble of idling engines around you. "Excuse me, sir, would you like to buy my bike?" You look down, and there's a boy maybe 8 years old, threadbare jacket 2 sizes too big, holding the handlebars of a beaten-up bicycle with a missing pedal and a rusted chain. His knuckles are white from gripping too hard, the way kids grip things when they're terrified of what they're about to do. "Your bike?" you ask, glancing at the sorry state of the thing. "It's worth maybe $5 at a yard sale, if that." "Yes, sir, it still rides good. I just need," the boy's voice catches, and he swallows hard before continuing. "I need the money today, please." You are 52 years old. You've been riding with the Iron Vultures, MC, for 18 years, and in that time, you've developed a particular radar for desperation, dressed up as a business transaction. This kid isn't selling a bike. This kid is asking for help and has decided, in the private logic of childhood, that begging is shameful, but selling is not. "What's your name, son?" you ask, dismounting. "Gideon," he says. "Gideon Marsh." "Well, Gideon, I might be interested, but first, tell me, what's the money for?" A man doesn't make a deal without knowing what he's really buying. Gideon's chin trembles, and for a moment you think he's going to bolt, the way scared animals do when cornered. Instead, he plants his feet, takes a breath that's too big for his small chest, and says the sentence that will follow you around for the rest of your life. "My mommy hasn't eaten in 2 days. She gives me her food, so I'm not hungry. And I heard her stomach growling last night, and she thinks I was asleep, but I wasn't. I need to buy her something. Please, sir, just tell me what the bike's worth, and I won't ask for more." The parking lot goes quiet. Not literally, engines still idle. A truck rumbles past on Route 9, but in your ears, everything drops away except this half-starved 8-year-old boy standing in front of you, with his broken bicycle and his impossible dignity. Behind you, you hear boots on gravel. Your brothers, Boone, Silas, and a woman named Marguerite, who's ridden with the club longer than most men twice her size, have come out of the hardware store, coffee cups in hand, and they've heard enough of the conversation to go very still. 2 days. Boone repeats quietly, like he's tasting the words and finding them bitter. "Where's your mama now, Gideon?" you ask. "At home. She doesn't know I came here. She'd be mad. She says we don't ask people for things." His eyes well up, and he wipes them fast with the back of his sleeve. "Embarrassed, the way boys are. Taught to be embarrassed about tears long before they should be. But I'm not asking. I'm selling. That's different." She can't be mad about selling. Something in your chest, a part of you that's been armored over by nearly 2 decades of a life. Most people cross the street to avoid cracks clean down the middle. "Tell you what," you say, crouching down to his eye level, "the way you learned to do with your own kids 20 years ago, back before they grew up and moved 3 states away and started only calling on birthdays. I'll buy your bike, but I'm going to pay you what it's actually worth to me, not what a stranger would say it's worth. And then my friends and I are going to walk you home, because a deal like this, I want to make sure it gets delivered proper." "How much?" Gideon asks, wary now, like he suspects a trick. You pull out your wallet. There's $60 in it. Everything you brought for the day. $60, you say. Gideon's eyes go enormous. "That's too much. It's not worth that much, sir. I don't want charity. Mommy says charity makes people feel small, and I don't want you to feel small." You have to look away for a second, out toward the highway, because if you keep looking at this child, you might do something undignified for a man in a leather cut with Iron Vultures MC stitched across the back. "Son," you say, when you trust your voice again, "this bike is worth exactly $60 to me today, because today it bought me the privilege of meeting the bravest kid I've met in a long time. That's not charity. That's a fair trade. You gave me something today didn't have before you rode up. You reminded me why decent people exist. That's worth $60, easy. Gideon studies you for a long moment. The particular scrutiny of a child who has learned too early to distinguish real kindness from performance. Whatever he sees in your face, it satisfies him. Okay, he says quietly, deal. You hand him the money. His hands shake as he takes it, folding the bills carefully, precisely, like something sacred. Now, you say, standing back up, joints protesting the way they do these days. Lead the way home. All of us are walking with you. Boone loads the broken bicycle into the bed of his truck. For sentimental value, he says gruffly. Though you all understand, he simply can't bring himself to leave it behind. This small artifact of a child's impossible courage. Marguerite falls into step beside Gideon, asking him easy questions about school, about his favorite color, giving him room to be 8 years old again for just a few minutes, instead of the small, desperate provider he's been forced to become. The walk to Gideon's house takes 15 minutes, down streets that get progressively more tired looking, past houses with peeling paint, and yards gone to seed, until you reach a small rental at the end of a dead-end street, gutters hanging loose, a single window covered with a bedsheet instead of curtains. This is it, Gideon says, suddenly hesitant, glancing between you and the door like he's just remembered his mother's rule about not asking people for things, and is only now calculating the size of the rule he's broken. Before he can knock, the door opens. The woman standing there is younger than you expected, maybe 28, thin in the specific way that isn't natural, isn't a body type. It's the thinness of someone who hasn't eaten properly in longer than 2 days, whatever Gideon believes. Her name, you'll learn shortly, is Renmarsh, and the exhaustion carved into her face is the particular exhaustion of a person who has been fighting a losing battle for a very long time, and has almost, but not quite, run out of fight. Gideon Everett Marsh, she says, and her voice cracks with a complicated mixture of fear and fury, the specific tone of a parent who has just realized their child was in danger they didn't know about. Where have you been? I've been calling for. She stops when she sees you, 4 leather-clad strangers standing behind her son on her cracked front walkway, and her face drains of what little color it had. What's going on? What did he do? Ma'am, you say gently, holding up both hands, palms out. The universal gesture of a man trying very hard not to look threatening, despite his size and his patches. Nothing's wrong. Your boy didn't do anything except show more courage than most grown men I know. I sold my bike, Gideon says, in a rush, holding up the folded bills like evidence, like proof of something. I got $60, mommy. It's for food. I know you said we don't ask for things, but I sold something I didn't ask. And now you can eat. And I'm sorry if you're mad, but I'm not sorry that I did it. Ren Marsh stares at the money in her son's hands, and something in her face collapses entirely. Not anger, you realize, but grief so raw it's almost violent in how completely it takes her over. She sinks down onto the front step, right there in front of for strangers, and puts her face in her hands, and weeps in the specific, silent, shoulder-shaking way of someone who has spent months holding herself together by force of will alone, and has just run out of that will completely. You weren't supposed to know, she says, muffled into her palms. I told you I wasn't hungry, I told you. I heard your stomach, mommy, Gideon says, kneeling beside her now, small hand on her back, comforting her the way children comfort parents when the roles have quietly, invisibly reversed. I hear it every night. I'm not stupid. I just didn't say anything because you always look so sad when I say something. Ren looks up at you, then. Mascara she probably hasn't worn in months smeared beneath redrimmed eyes, and you see in her face the particular shame of a parent who believes, wrongly, but completely, that her child's hunger is her personal failure, rather than the failure of circumstances that crushed her. My husband left 8 months ago, she says, before you've even asked, the words spilling out like a confession she's been holding too long. Took the savings account, took the car. I lost my job 3 weeks after that. They said it was restructuring, but I think it was because I kept having to leave early for Gideon's doctor appointments. He has asthma, and the inhaler alone costs. She stops, seems to catch herself sharing too much with strangers, and looks away, ashamed. I've been applying everywhere, she continues quietly. Every day. I just haven't found anything yet. And the little bit of savings I had left, I've been stretching it for him, for his medicine, for the rent, and there wasn't enough left for both of us to eat. Some weeks, I thought I was hiding it better than this. You weren't hiding anything wrong, Marguerite says, crouching down beside her, voice fierce with something that isn't pity. If it's recognition, the particular recognition of one hard life acknowledging another, you were surviving. There's a difference, and don't you let anybody, including yourself, tell you otherwise. You look at Boone looks at Silas. Some conversations happen entirely without words between men who've ridden together long enough. And this is one of them. Ma'am, you say, going to ask you something, and I want you to hear the whole question before you decide to say no, because I suspect you're about to say no. Ren wipes her eyes, wary again. The particular wariness of someone who has learned that offers of help often come with invisible strings. The Iron Vultures do a food drive every month, you say. This isn't strictly true yet, but it's about to become true in the next 30 seconds, and you'll sort out the details later. We partner with local families going through hard stretches. No charity, no handouts with strings attached. It's community support, plain and simple. The same as neighbors have always done for each other before food banks needed corporate sponsors to exist. I'd like your family to be part of that, starting today. I can't accept, Ren starts, and you watch the old, familiar shape of refusal forming on her face. The reflex of someone who has spent 8 months insisting she doesn't need what she very clearly needs. Ren, Marguerite says her name firmly, cutting through the refusal before it can fully form, her voice gentle but unwilling to be argued with. Look at me. You've been carrying this alone because you decided, somewhere along the way, that asking for help meant you'd failed at something. I need you to hear this. You didn't fail. The world failed you. And then your son found for strangers willing to help. Fix that. Let us. Ren is quiet for a long moment, staring down at her own hands, at the thin gold band she still wears on her finger, despite everything. Some old habit or old hope she hasn't been ready to let go of yet. I keep thinking, she says, finally, so quietly, you almost miss it, that if I just try harder, apply to one more place, stretch the grocery budget one more week, it'll turn around on its own. That accepting help means admitting it's not going to turn around by itself. It's not going to, you tell her, as gently as you know how. Not because you haven't tried hard enough, because you've been trying to bail out a boat with a hole in it, all by yourself, for 8 months. Nobody does that alone. Nobody's supposed to. Something shifts in her face. Not surrender. Exactly. But recognition. The specific relief of a person finally allowed to stop pretending she's fine. Okay, she says, and the word comes out cracked, but certain. Okay, yes, thank you. You're not accepting anything today, you say, gently but firmly. Today, your son sold a bike for $60, fair and square, to a man who needed a reminder of decency. Everything else we're about to do is just neighbors being neighbors. That's not charity. That's Tuesday. It's not Tuesday. It's Saturday. But Ren, despite everything, lets out a small, surprised laugh at the absurdity of it. The first crack of light breaking through what has clearly been months of unbroken darkness. Within the hour, half the Iron Vultures MC has descended on the small grocery store 2 blocks away. And within 2 hours, Ren Marsh's kitchen bare when you first walked past it. A single can of soup and a mostly empty peanut butter jar, the only inhabitants of her pantry, is stocked with more food than she's had in her house in 8 months. Boone, it turns out, has a cousin who manages the hardware store and knows a guy who's hiring at the warehouse. Steady work, good benefits, mostly daytime hours, he tells Ren, already pulling out his phone to make the call. Silas, whose daughter has asthma too, produces a list of assistance programs for prescription costs that Ren didn't know existed, programs buried in bureaucratic language design. It seems, specifically to be missed by people too exhausted to hunt for them. Gideon, meanwhile, has been adopted. There's no other word for it by 3 grown bikers who spend the afternoon teaching him how a real motorcycle engine works, letting him sit on Marguerite's bike in the driveway making engine noises with his mouth, treating him with the specific, careful gentleness that men who look intimidating sometimes reserve only for children, as if to prove to themselves and the world that toughness and tenderness were never actually opposites. You know, Marguerite tells him, as he sits proudly astride her bike, you did something today that took more courage than most adults have. You didn't wait for someone to save you. You went out and found a way to save your mom yourself. That's not something every kid can do. I was scared, Gideon admits. I thought you'd say no, or laugh at me. We almost did the opposite of laugh, Marguerite says, and doesn't elaborate further, though you notice her eyes are suspiciously bright. By evening, as the last of the daylight goes gold and long across Ren's small front yard, you sit on the porch steps with her while Gideon chases fireflies with Boone, shrieking with the specific, unrestrained joy of an 8-year-old who has, for one evening at least, gotten to simply be 8 years old. I don't know how to thank you, Ren says. Any of you. I've spent so long trying to handle this alone, because I was ashamed. Because I kept thinking someone else needed the help more than we did. Everybody thinks that, you tell her. Everybody thinks their struggle isn't bad enough to deserve help. Right up until the moment their kid tries to sell his bike to a stranger to buy you food. Don't spend more time being ashamed of surviving hard circumstances. Spend that energy on healing instead. You've got people now. Use us. Why? She asks, genuinely puzzled. Why would a group of strangers do all this for us? You think about it for a long moment, watching Gideon's small silhouette chase light against the darkening sky. Because a long time ago, you say slowly, I was a kid who needed somebody to notice, and mostly, nobody did. You haven't told this story in years, not even to your own club brothers, but something about this porch, this evening, this particular kind of exhaustion in Ren's face makes it feel like the right moment. My old man drank. My mother worked 2 jobs trying to cover what he drank away, and some weeks, there wasn't much left over for groceries either. I used to walk to school the long way, past a diner, because the owner would sometimes leave the kitchen door propped open and let kids like me take the biscuits that didn't sell from the day before. Never said a word about it, just left the door open on the days he had extra, closed on the days he didn't. I never thanked him. Never even learned his name, but I've spent 30 years since then trying to be somebody propped open. Door, if that makes any sense. It makes perfect sense, Ren says quietly. I told myself, a long time ago, that if I ever had the means to be the person who notices, I would be. Your son didn't just sell a bike today, ma'am. He reminded a whole group of grown men why we do any of this, why we ride, why we call ourselves brothers, why any of it matters beyond the leather and the noise. He gave us something worth a lot more than $60. The following Tuesday, an actual Tuesday, this time, Ren sits across from Boone's cousin at the warehouse office, hands folded tightly in her lap, wearing the one blazer she still owns from a job she held before Gideon was born. The interview lasts 20 minutes. She calls Marguerite the moment she's back in her car, voice shaking with the hope she's clearly afraid to fully trust yet. They said they'd let me know by Friday, she says. I don't want to get my hopes up. Get them up, anyway, Marguerite tells her. You've spent 8 months not letting yourself hope for anything. See how it feels for a change. Friday comes, and with it, a phone call, and Ren gets the job. Steady hours, benefits starting after 30 days, enough to finally exhale, for the first time in what she'll later describe as the longest year of her life. The 30-day wait for benefits is its own small mountain to climb. Gideon's inhaler runs low twice. During that stretch, and both times, it's Silas who shows up at the house with the assistance program, paperwork already filled out, sitting at Ren's kitchen table, walking her through each form with the patience of a man who has clearly done this before, for his own daughter, more times than he'd like to admit. You don't have to do this, Ren tells him the second time. Halfway through the paperwork, her pride, flaring briefly before exhaustion, smooths it back down. I know, Silas says simply, not looking up from the form. I'm doing it anyway. That's sort of the whole point. There are hard days still. In that stretch, a night when the new job's first paycheck is delayed by the bank, and Ren calls Marguerite in a near panic, certain the ground is about to fall out from under her. Family all over again, only to find a grocery bag already sitting on her porch by the time she hangs up the phone. No note, no fanfare, just quietly there, the way the Iron Vultures have started doing things for her family, without asking permission or expecting thanks. Slowly, month by month, the ground stops feeling quite so unstable beneath her. 6 months after that Saturday afternoon, Ren Marsh is working steady hours at the warehouse. Boone's cousin recommended, benefits fully active now. Gideon's asthma medication, covered without the monthly financial terror it used to represent. The Iron Vultures food drive, which was invented on the spot that Saturday afternoon, purely for Ren's benefit, and which has since become an actual, permanent monthly tradition, now supports 6 families across the county. Each one found the same way Ren was, by accident, by attention, by grown men and women choosing to notice the quiet desperation that most people walk past without seeing. At school, Gideon's teacher mentions to Ren at a parent conference that he started raising his hand more, participating in a way he never used to, like some invisible weight has been lifted enough for him to simply be a third grader again, instead of a small, exhausted caretaker. When his class does an assignment about someone who inspires you, Gideon writes 2 full pages about a group of bikers who taught him that asking for help isn't the same as giving up. The teacher, moved enough to mention it specifically, tells Ren she's never seen a student write with that much conviction about anything before. Gideon has a new bicycle now, real one, gifted by the club on his 9th birthday, complete with a small patch sewn onto his backpack that reads, Honorary Iron Vulture, in the same stitching style as the members' cuts. He rides it everywhere, trailed most weekends by at least one very large, very devoted motorcycle escort, much to the visible confusion and eventual delight of the neighborhood. The old broken bicycle, the one Boone loaded into his truck bed for sentimental value, sits, restored now, chain fixed, missing pedal replaced, in the clubhouse of the Iron Vultures, MC mounted on the wall like a trophy, with a small plaque beneath it that reads simply, The day we remembered why we ride. You still think, sometimes, about that Saturday afternoon, the small, terrified voice asking if you'd like to buy his bike, the impossible dignity of a child who refused to call his desperate act anything other than a fair trade. You think about how close you came to simply waving him off, the way most strangers probably did before he found you. Too busy, too tired, too accustomed to the world's small tragedies to stop and really look at what was standing in front of them. You didn't buy a bike that day. You bought yourself a reminder. The kind that doesn't fade, the kind that changes the shape of a whole motorcycle club's purpose going forward. That, sometimes the smallest, most desperate voices are carrying the heaviest, most important truths, and all it costs to hear them is the willingness to actually stop and listen. Gideon Marsh sold his bike for $60 on a Saturday afternoon in September. What he actually gave you was worth immeasurably more, and you suspect, deep down, that he understood that trade far better than you did. Standing there in his too big jacket, with his chin held high, refusing, even in his most desperate hour, to let anyone call his courage by any name other than what it truly was.
Thank you for watching this story. Somewhere near you, there may be someone carrying a heavy weight, just waiting for a hand to reach out If this story moved you, please subscribe and share it with someone who needs a little hope today. Thank you.